My life, for the past few years, had been a beautiful, chaotic, and deeply unprofitable mess. My small one-bedroom apartment felt more like a cramped studio than a home. The air hung heavy with turpentine and oil paint, and the floors were splattered like a living Jackson Pollock. The morning of my eviction, I opened the door to my landlord, bracing for the final humiliation, but he wasn't looking at me. His eyes were fixed, wide with shock, on the old man in a wheelchair who had just arrived to thank me for helping him the day before. My landlord's face went pale, and he whispered a single word that changed everything. "Before we begin, tell me what city you're watching from today, and don't forget to subscribe for our daily stories. Now let's head to that steep hill." The notice stated, in no uncertain terms, that if my 3 months of back rent wasn't paid by tomorrow, eviction would begin. I had spent the entire discouraging afternoon trying to stop that from happening. I carried my best canvases to 3 different galleries, each time clinging to a fragile thread of hope. Each time, I was turned away with polite rejection. I was an artist, a painter, and like many before me, I was gifted at my craft but terrible at paying rent on time. On my kitchen counter sat the final warning notice from my landlord, Mr. Thorne, a sharp and famously unsentimental businessman, a stark white rectangle of reality cutting through my colorful bohemian world. "Your work is very passionate," one gallery owner told me, "but its set's not very commercial." Defeated, I walked home with my heavy portfolio case in hand, feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. The steep hill up to my building felt like a cruel joke. Even on good days it left me breathless. Today, it felt like a mountain. Halfway up, I saw him. An old man, probably in his 70s, stuck in a heavy-duty electric wheelchair. The control panel was dark, the battery clearly dead. He was trying, with frustrated grunts and stubborn effort, to push the heavy wheels himself, but he wasn't moving. My first instinct, fueled by exhaustion and self-pity, was to keep walking. I had my own hill to climb. I didn't feel strong enough, literally or figuratively, to help anyone else with theirs. But then he let out a low, angry curse and smacked the armrest of his chair, a gesture so raw and human it broke through my wall of misery. I didn't see a stranger anymore. I saw someone just as stuck as I was. With a sigh, I changed direction. "Looks like you're having a rough day," I said, my voice a little hoarse. He looked up, his eyes a sharp, irritated blue. "It sets a steep hill," I said, stating the obvious. "Do you need a hand?" "The damn thing died without warning," he grumbled in a gravelly voice. "Second time this month." But as he looked up at the long, unforgiving slope, the fight seemed to drain from him. He sighed, a sound of weary defeat I knew all too well. "I don't need a hand," he snapped, his pride brittle and sharp. "I need a new battery." "Yes, son," he admitted quietly. "I believe I do." I set down my heavy portfolio. "Okay," I said, "on 3. The next 20 minutes were grueling, sweat-drenched but strangely beautiful. The wheelchair was a dead weight of steel and rubber, and the old man, whose name I learned was Walter, was a proud yet surprisingly funny curmudgeon. As we pushed inch by inch up the hill, we talked. He complained about the city, the weather, and the failures of modern technology. I complained about the pretentiousness of the art world. Two strangers from different generations, different worlds, bound together by a moment of shared struggle. When we finally reached the top, near a small bus stop, we were both breathless, sweat glistening on our faces. "Well," he said, his sharp blue eyes now holding a new look of respect, "I don't know how I'd have managed that without you, son. Let me pay you for your trouble." He began reaching for his wallet. "No, sir," I said, shaking my head. "Don't worry about it. Just have a better day." He looked at me for a long, quiet moment. "You're a good kid," he said at last, giving me a small, almost imperceptible nod of genuine approval. Of course, that feeling vanished the moment I stepped inside and saw the stark white eviction notice still on my kitchen table, a paper tombstone for my life in this city. A few minutes later, the bus arrived, its hydraulic lift lowered to take him aboard. I walked the final block home, my muscles aching with a strangely satisfying burn. Helping Walter had been an unexpected antidote to my self-pity. For a brief time, I'd forgotten about my eviction and failed dreams. I had simply been a man helping another man up a hill. The night was long and sleepless. I didn't pack. It felt too final, too much like surrender. Instead, I sat in the moonlit chaos of my studio, staring at my unfinished canvases, the ghosts of 100 paintings I had dreamed but never had the time or money to create. What I was sacrificing wasn't just unpaid rent. It was the life I couldn't live. A creative life slowly strangled by harsh reality. I thought of the old man, his stubborn pride, his quiet dignity. I hoped he'd made it home safely. Then I stopped thinking of him at all. Just another passing chapter in a book about to slam shut. At exactly 15 minutes late, a detail I knew he'd resent. There was a sharp, authoritative knock at my door. This was it. My landlord, Mr. Thorne, who valued punctuality and profit above all else, would arrive any minute to finalize the eviction and take my keys. I showered. I put on my least paint-stained shirt. I refused to face this as a victim. I would face it as a man. The next morning, I woke not to my alarm, but to a harsh shaft of sunlight across my face. It was 10 a.m., the hour of my execution. I took a steadying breath, a silent apology to my failed dreams, and walked to the door. I braced for his cold, condescending look. But when I opened it, my dead-end world took a sudden, incomprehensible turn. There stood my landlord, Mr. Thorne, immaculate as ever, eviction papers in hand like a weapon. But he was not alone. Standing just behind him, looking slightly awkward but deeply familiar, was Walter, the old man from the hill. I just stood there, my mind completely blank, unable to process the scene before me. What was he doing here? Was he a friend of my landlord, or was this some strange, cruel coincidence? Mr. Thorne, my landlord, spoke first. His tone carried a sharp, familiar irritation that felt completely misplaced. Walter ignored his son and turned to me with a look of genuine warmth in his sharp blue eyes. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking in disbelief. "What are you doing here? I told you I had a business matter this morning." That single word, Dad, hit me like a physical blow. The grumpy, proud old man I had helped up the hill yesterday wasn't just anyone. He was my landlord's estranged father. "This is the man you were talking about?" he asked. "I came to properly thank this young man," he said in his gravelly voice. "He showed me great kindness yesterday when others wouldn't accept." Mr. Thorne's eyes shifted between his father and me, suspicion dawning on his face. "Yes," Walter replied. His gaze then fell on the eviction notice in his son's hand. He glanced at my worried face, and suddenly, the full, ironic picture became clear. His expression hardened. The gentle old man was gone, replaced by a father filled with quiet authority and deep disappointment. "A business matter," he repeated, his voice low and trembling with controlled anger. "So this is your business, evicting the one person in this city kind enough to help your own father when he was stranded and alone?" I stood silently in my doorway, caught between my cold, stunned landlord and his furious, disappointed father. The air in the narrow hallway felt thick, heavy with years of unspoken resentment that had suddenly erupted here on my doorstep. "Dad," he stammered, struggling to recover his composure, "this isn't set what it looks like. It's set's just business. Mr. Wyatt is 3 months behind on rent. I have a legal obligation." "A legal obligation?" Walter interrupted, his tone low but heavy with sorrow. "And what about your moral obligation, Thomas? Your human obligation?" Moments earlier, Mr. Thorne had been the picture of control and authority. Now he looked like a guilty schoolboy caught doing something shameful. His face was pale, his voice small. Then he turned to me, his intelligent blue eyes filled with quiet respect. "This young man," he continued, his voice rising with fierce pride, "a complete stranger with struggles of his own, saw me in need and didn't hesitate. He didn't see a burden, he saw a person. He pushed me and my 200-pound wheelchair up that steep hill with his own 2 hands. He showed me more genuine kindness in 20 minutes than my own son has shown me in 5 years. He gestured toward me. I've spent the last 5 years in that wheelchair, in that lonely apartment you so dutifully pay for, but rarely visit. In all that time, you've been too busy with your business matters to see me more than once or twice a year. You've called me a burden, a stubborn old fool who refuses your help. And your response," Walter said coldly, "is to throw this good man onto the street. That SEP's not business, Thomas. That SEP's a failure of character, a failure of humanity, a failure as my son." The words were so raw and heartfelt that they shattered the landlord's cold composure. He didn't argue, he just crumbled. The confident businessman was gone, replaced by a broken son. Walter's gaze returned to his son, a look so full of shame that Mr. Thorne actually flinched. "I tried, Dad," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "I tried to help you. I offered a better apartment, a nurse, everything. You wouldn't let me in. You pushed me away." For a long moment, the hallway was silent. 2 men, a father and son, stood face to face, separated by years of pride and distance, and I, the struggling artist, who was about to lose his home, was the only witness to their long overdue reckoning. "I didn't set one a nurse," Walter shouted, his voice filled with pain. "I wanted my son." "The eviction," he said, his voice calm but final, "is cancelled." At last, Walter took a deep, steady breath and looked at the eviction notice still clutched in his son's shaking hand. With slow precision, he took the papers, tore them into 4 neat pieces, and let them fall to the floor. He then turned to me, a faint spark of humor lighting his eyes. "As for your back rent, Wyatt," he said, "my son and I will handle that. Consider it a down payment on our long overdue family therapy." The tension in the air slowly gave way to silence, a silence filled with years of unspoken emotion. Walter finally broke it. He glanced past his son into my messy, paint-splattered studio. "Well," he said, his gravelly tone softening, "it seems we have much to talk about, and this young man SEP's hallway is hardly the place for it. Wyatt, my son tells me you likely have a kettle. After the day we SEP all had, I think we could use a strong cup of tea." It wasn't a question, it was the gentle command of a man used to taking charge. I nodded silently and stepped aside, holding the door open. He looked at me again, his blue eyes now warm. "You have talent, son," Walter said softly, his eyes fixed on a large unfinished seascape filled with dark rolling waves. Before I could respond, his son, my landlord, spoke in a low, trembling voice. "I tried, Dad," he whispered, eyes on the floor. "After Mom died, I did everything I could to help you. I wanted to move you into a better apartment, hire a nurse, get you whatever you needed, but you wouldn't let me in. You shut me out every time." The 3 of us, the landlord, his father, and the tenant he had just tried to evict, awkwardly filed into my small, cluttered living room. The contrast between us was almost absurd. The 2 men, both dressed in immaculate tailored suits, now sat surrounded by my paint-streaked, chaotic, and entirely unprofitable world. I made tea, and we sat in uneasy silence. The only sound was the whistle of the kettle as I returned with the mugs. Neither man looked at the other. Instead, both stared quietly at my paintings. The canvases leaning against every wall spoke silently of my lonely and uncertain existence. "I didn't set one a nurse," Walter suddenly roared, his voice raw with years of suppressed pain. "I wanted my son. I wanted you to sit with me, not send your assistant. I wanted to talk about your mother, not stocks and investments." After a long silence, their tears slowed, replaced by a fragile but genuine peace. Walter spoke first, turning to me with eyes full of deep gratitude. "Wyatt," he said, "my son and I have a long road ahead to mend what we've broken, but none of this." He gestured between himself and his son. "None of this healing would have happened without you. Your small act of kindness toward a grumpy old man reminded us what truly matters." Then something remarkable happened. My landlord, the man I had always seen as cold and heartless, began to cry. First quietly, then with deep shuddering sobs, the kind that come from a lifetime of buried sorrow. He confessed his own loneliness, the crushing expectations he had carried, and the weight of always having to appear strong, never weak, never vulnerable. And I, the struggling artist on the verge of eviction, sat silently, witnessing something rare and profoundly human, a father and son, both broken in their own ways, finally finding their way back to each other. He then looked at his son. "Thomas," he said firmly, "you were about to evict this young man. That sips a stain on our family, sips honor, and you will make it right." Thomas Thorne, my landlord, turned toward me. For the first time, I didn't see a ruthless businessman but a man stripped of pride and pretense. "He's right," he whispered. He stood, walked over, and said, "Wyatt, I am deeply sorry for everything. Your back rent is forgiven, and I would be honored if you'd stay here as my guest rent-free for the next 12 months." I was stunned. A year, an entire year without rent, the freedom to paint without fear. It was a gift beyond measure. The weeks that followed were a quiet transformation. Thomas kept his word. The constant pressure of overdue bills lifted, and for the first time in years, I felt light. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was creating. My tiny apartment, once a space of struggle, became a sanctuary of color and purpose. I painted freely, joyfully, unburdened by fear or the need to please anyone. Walter Sepp's eyes twinkled as they rested on the stormy seascape. "And one more thing," he said, with a faint smile. "I think I sipped like to buy that painting for my study. Name your price." A week later, Walter returned, alone this time, to see the finished seascape. He stood before it in silence for several minutes, his sharp blue eyes tracing every brushstroke. "It's magnificent," he said finally, his voice low and sincere. "It reminds me of my wife. She loved the sea when it stormed." He wrote a check so generous, it made my hands shake. It wasn't charity, it was respect. One artist recognizing another. A year later, I stood in the heart of a bright, modern gallery, my first sold-out solo exhibition. The room buzzed with quiet admiration from critics and collectors. At the center hung the stormy seascape, with a brass plaque beneath it reading, "From the private collection of the Thorne family." I came to see Thomas, not as a heartless landlord, but as a man shaped by pressure and the need for his father's approval, and Walter, the powerful billionaire, I saw as an old man who had nearly lost everything to grief and pride. I realized I hadn't just pushed a stranger up a hill that day. I had unknowingly helped a father and son climb back to each other. That day marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Every Sunday, without fail, Walter and Thomas would visit. They brought coffee and pastries, and the three of us, the aging patriarch, the humbled son, and the once desperate artist, would sit together and talk. We spoke of art, business, love, loss, and the complex bond between fathers and sons. I hadn't just been given a year of free rent. I had been given back my purpose, my life. And the greatest masterpiece I'd ever helped create wasn't painted on canvas. It was the beautiful, messy restoration of a broken family. Across the room, I saw them, Thomas and Walter, standing together, smiling, laughing. They weren't just my patrons anymore. They were family. Watching them, I remembered that long ago afternoon when I thought my life was over, when I believed I'd lost everything. I couldn't have known that my second chance would arrive disguised as a grumpy old man in a broken wheelchair at the bottom of a hill. A truly moving reminder of how a single act of kindness can transform lives. What do you think of Walter's unusual way of testing people's character? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of redemption and second chances touched your heart, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing, and turning on notifications so you never miss another heartwarming story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.